morning, everyone. I hope your day is going well. A few months ago, there was a bit of a trend on YouTube. Minecraft horror mods. It felt like every week YouTubers were finding something new to be scared of, be it a Wendigo, weeping angels, or a really skinny guy with a knife. And in response to these extremely popular videos, there was a bit of a counter trend. Other YouTubers making various videos on why these mods are actually bad and not really scary at all. I enjoyed watching both sides of this go down at the time. I really like long videos, so watching someone survive 100 days in a horrific zombie apocalypse is kind of my jam. And I also really like thinking way too hard about things, so it was fun to see other people dissect these mods and talk about how effective or ineffective they were. Some of these criticisms I think are understandable. Throwing a scary face PNG at the screen at random points isn't exactly peak horror, but there was one line of thought that bothered me. That being that these mods are only scary at first, and then you get used to them and it's not scary anymore. This is technically true. After you encounter the new monster of the week a few times, it becomes much less unnerving. But this didn't feel like a fair criticism to me, because that's not a problem specific to Minecraft mods. That's just something that happens with horror media. Horror thrives in the unknown. Its most powerful tool is letting the audience stare down a dark hallway and imagine something 10 times worse than anything the creator could have come up with. Anything that's trying to scare the audience has to wrestle with the fact that it's going to be really hard to maintain that tension after the monster is finally fully revealed. So while you can just say, this mod stops being scary after Mr. Shadow Smile shows up a few times, that doesn't feel like the full picture to me. And this got me thinking about the principles of horror that video games often use to try and scare the player, and how those principles might apply or not apply to these Minecraft horror mods. And I started to realize that it's pretty difficult to make a Minecraft mod scary in the way people want, because all the problems that other horror games deal with are much more difficult for these mods to overcome. And with the Minecraft movie coming out, I thought now was a good time to explain what I mean by that. Hopefully this deep dive can be some good food for thought and maybe even inspire some people in the future. We'll mostly be taking a look at games in the survival horror genre, since I think those games are the closest to the experience these horror mods are aiming for. But before we begin in earnest, I feel that there's something I need to confess that's a little bit embarrassing. Most of the time, when you see these criticism videos, the YouTuber makes a big show of how not scared they are. They might jump occasionally, but for the most part, they're stalwart and mildly inconvenienced more than scared. It would not be honest for me to pretend that that was my experience. Because as you can probably tell from the gameplay footage I've been showing, I was scared of these Minecraft mods. See, even though a lot of my content is horror related and I love analyzing horror media, when it comes to actually experiencing the horrors, I am super easily spooked. I have a very active imagination and I'm not that great at video games. Two facts that combine and have me jumping at my shadow pretty much the whole time. My first attempt at recording for the Cave Dweller is basically unusable because I spent most of the time staring at walls trying to convince myself to go into the cave. And the rest of the time I spent dying to things that weren't the Cave Dweller because I kept going into caves unprepared. And then he spawned underwater while I was digging toward the cave noises and murdered me. It might seem counterintuitive for me to make a video talking about how Minecraft mods aren't scary when they were so clearly effective at scaring me. But here's the thing. To be blunt, I don't consider scaring me to be that impressive. Like I said, I have a very active imagination and not much experience with this sort of thing. It's very easy to put me on edge. It's honestly kind of annoying because the logical part of my brain can see the techniques being used to scare me and pretty accurately predict what will happen next, but that doesn't matter because literally nothing can convince my lizard brain that the Shadow Man isn't about to kill us in real life. So, yeah. Even though I get skittish enough in-game that I immediately start sprinting when I hear a weird noise, regardless of what direction I'm facing, I feel confident that I can analyze what these mods are trying to do and whether or not they're succeeding at it. And for the record, I did eventually start getting slightly more used to the horrors, if only slightly. One last quick note, the mods I played were Cave Dweller, The Man from the Fog, and Better Horror Plink. Better Horror Plink is a mod pack made by Common Pawn for Astral Spiff, who's a YouTuber I'm a really big fan of. I think it has like 42 horror mods in it. Cave Dweller I played because it basically started this whole horror mod trend in the first place. The Man from the Fog I played because it's pretty popular and it felt like a good way to see what these mods are like generally. And Better Horror Plink I played because it looked absolutely insane and I wanted to try it. If there is a horror mod you wish I'd played, it's probably somewhere in this mod pack. But in the case that it isn't, be sure to leave a comment and tell me what mods I missed out on. Now that I actually know how mods work, maybe I can check some of them out at some point. Right, now that that's out of the way, let's actually do some analysis. I hope you enjoy, and make sure to have water handy. Let's get to talking about horror and Minecraft. The issues with these Minecraft mods start well before the first line of code is even written, because there's a fundamental disconnect in what these mods are trying to do and what Minecraft is trying to do. Horror games are primarily here for one thing. They want to scare their audience. Sure, there might be other elements like puzzle solving and resource management and emotional trauma, but stripped down to its core, that's what a horror game wants to do. It wants you to be afraid. And that is not the goal of Minecraft. Although people have been talking about Minecraft and its horror elements for years now, the base version of the game is not trying to scare you. It is the quintessential sandbox game. It wants you to go in and build things. Any challenges thrown your way are secondary to the fact that you can do whatever you want. So when someone comes along and decides they want to make Minecraft scary, they're already fighting a bit of an uphill battle. Remember how I talked about horror thriving in the unknown? Most horror games do their best to keep you in the dark, both literally and figuratively, because it helps increase the scare factor. You don't understand it, therefore you fear it. This is extremely hard for Minecraft mods to do because Minecraft is probably the most well-known and well-understood game of all time. Everyone knows you punch trees to get wood, you shouldn't dig straight down, and most importantly of all, don't mine at night. The only really new thing these horror mod creators can add is their monsters, and once players figure out how that works, there's not really anything you can do to keep them invested. I think that's the reason some people bring up the "it's not scary once you get used to it" criticism. Getting used to the horrors is a problem for all horror games. It's just so much more obvious when the game trying to scare you is Minecraft. It's like your parents deciding to turn their garage into a mini haunted house for Halloween. Someone jumping out at you in a scary mask might be startling, but at the end of the day, this is your house. It's home to you, and no amount of spooky set dressing can really change the fact that your mom is going to make you and your friends cookies after trick-or-treating. I think some creators try to mitigate this by making their monster as threatening as possible. This approach leans into the idea that yes, you're familiar with your environment, but something is wrong here. There's something evil invading this place that you once knew so well. To continue with the house analogy, it doesn't matter how well you know your childhood home, it's still going to be terrifying if you turn a corner and a rabid dog jumps at you. But this approach leads to another problem. Having a big scary monster that instantly kills the player in one hit might seem like a good way to scare them, but putting something like this in a game can actually have the opposite effect. Do you ever notice that when a YouTuber is playing the latest indie horror and gets into a chase scene, they almost always get away? The chase is often tense and has some cool parts in it, but most of the time they're able to complete it fairly easily. Some of these enemies are even programmed to stay a specific distance behind the player, close enough to make them sweat, but not so close that a single mistake instantly kills you. These sections are specifically designed so that dying during them is the outlier, not the norm. Why do you think that is? It's not because horror developers think their audiences are bad at games, and it's not because YouTubers are inherently better gamers than everyone else. It's because as soon as you die in a video game, you get a game over screen. And this screen is a massive problem for the horror experience, because it's a stark, inescapable reminder that the thing you were just terrified of isn't actually real. It weakens the immersion by reminding you that you're just playing a video game. And before long, you're not worried about getting caught by the monster, you're worried about losing your progress. That worry can very quickly turn into annoyance, and when that happens, it can be pretty difficult to find the game anything but frustrating. Horror games are designed to balance on a razor's edge. They want to be difficult enough to be challenging, but not so difficult that the player is dying over and over. Whether or not specific games achieve this balance is up to personal interpretation. The point is that this is another thing all horror games have to grapple with that's especially hard for horror Minecraft mods to handle. We talked a bit about why these mod developers might be tempted to turn their monsters into unstoppable killing machines. With Minecraft being a game that people know so well, you want the stuff you add to be as flashy and terrifying as it can be. But another thing motivating these creators to make their monsters so strong are the monsters that already exist in base Minecraft. Things like zombies, skeletons, and spiders can be problems if you're not prepared, but they're generally not that hard to deal with. They go down pretty easily if you understand the combat system, they can get stuck in boats, most of them can't climb, and if all else fails, the open world allows you to just keep running away until they forget about you. Even if you end up cornered, you can always burrow into a wall and hide until you have a better idea of how to deal with them. Horror mod creators obviously want their enemy to be more threatening than the average zombie, so most of them are designed so these easy countermeasures don't work. These monsters are faster than you, they can ignore boats, they can either climb themselves or will just straight up teleport on top of you, and some of them can even break blocks and doors. I completely understand why you'd make your creature this way, but it creates a scenario where there's nothing the player can do except die. Basically, the only way to survive an encounter with one of these things is to find a way to cheese it. You manage to find a scenario the creator didn't plan for and watch as the monster meant to be unstoppable has a conniption. And listen, I absolutely love cheese, but I don't think this is very fun, and it's definitely not scary. So what do we do about it? We've established that just killing the player over and over isn't a good idea, but you don't want your monster to look like a chump either. Other horror games, such as Resident Evil, balance the threat of their monsters by slowly opening up more of the map over time. As you enter new areas and get stronger, the enemies you encounter also get stronger and scarier. They're never so difficult that you're constantly being ripped apart, but you still need to be careful about managing your resources, or you can get into trouble really fast. If you could find a way to do this sort of enemy scaling for Minecraft, it could be a really effectively tense experience. But Resident Evil is a survival horror game confined to a relatively small map you slowly get access to more of over time, and Minecraft is a procedurally generated building simulator that prioritizes player freedom, so trying to implement your enemies in the same way for both games is very unrealistic. But maybe we can take the principle of enemies getting harder over time and still apply it in Minecraft. Because there is a fairly straightforward way of tracking how strong the player is getting. Achievements. If you want your monster to scale in power based on the player, you can attach its health, strength, and even aggression level to how far along the player is in their achievements. In theory, this allows you to ensure that your big monster only becomes a problem when your player is ready to handle it. But even if this works in theory, this system still has its pitfalls. Again, Minecraft is an open world game. There's really no way to control what achievements the player gets and in what order. There's not really a way to make sure that all players are progressing at the same rate, so you kind of just have to guess. Let's imagine that in, say, The Man from the Fog, Mr. Foggy only spawns after the player has smelted iron for the first time. From an enemy design perspective, it's easy to see why you'd make this decision. The Man from the Fog is a stalker enemy. Every 10 to 15 minutes, he'll spawn and begin watching the player, slowly moving closer before either attacking or despawning. This means that he's most effective when the player stays in one location, or at least has a home base they return to frequently. By the time most players are getting iron, they're at least thinking of finding a place to settle down, and if they weren't thinking about it, having the man spawn gives you a pretty good motivation to build a fortress for yourself. By attaching the man showing up to this specific progression point, you can theoretically ensure that your monster has the best chance possible of scaring the player. But there's a lot of different ways a player could get iron, and there's not really a way to guarantee the experience you intend by following this method. This was literally 5 minutes into me recording. I was not remotely prepared. After doing some testing in several other worlds, I can say pretty definitively that the man from the fog spawning is not connected to the first time the player puts iron in a furnace, though I think I can be forgiven for assuming that's how it worked based on what happened. But the point I'm trying to make still stands. Trying to balance the dangers of your mod based on the achievements the player gets is a cool idea, but in practice, there's almost no way to ensure that the sequence you intended plays out the same for every player. But what if we went in the opposite direction? It's not like there's only one way to scare someone. Sometimes the whole point of the monster is that your only option is to run and pray you don't get found. Games like Outlast and Amnesia: The Dark Descent fall into this category. Where other games might get their tension from limiting how much you can fight back, these games take away your ability to fight altogether. There aren't weapons of any kind, there's no easy escape, and the danger is always present. These games are about feeling helpless. They want you to feel frantic and paranoid because you know if you get caught, there's nothing you can do. You keep wishing for something, anything to defend yourself with, but there is nothing. And that's the whole point. And the environment you're in these games adds to that tension. Not only are you defenseless, you're in an unfamiliar place with no idea how to get out. And no matter how hard you try and escape, there's always something that forces you to go deeper. If you can get the atmosphere right, playing games like this make for an absolutely horrific experience. In a good way. But I'm sure you can already see the problems with trying to implement these ideas into the setting of Minecraft. Both Amnesia and Outlast are games about feeling trapped. You're stuck somewhere you don't know with limited tools and no idea what's going on. The entire experience is predicated on the fact that there's nothing you can do except hope you manage to hide fast enough. How are you meant to make someone feel trapped in Minecraft? The ability to go anywhere and do anything is part of what makes people love this game so much in the first place. Even when your back is against the wall, there's nothing stopping you from digging straight through. Well, what if you try to limit this? These sneak and survive type games completely remove combat, something that was a pretty big part of horror games up until that point. You can try and do something similar for Minecraft, like, say, taking away the ability to sleep. But if you try to do this, you circle back to the very first problem with trying to make Minecraft scary. Everyone knows how Minecraft works and what you're supposed to be able to do. I've been saying that these other games take away or remove the player's ability to do things, but that's kind of a misnomer. You're not really taking something away if it was never there to begin with. While playing Outlast, there's no reason to question why Miles Upshur never tries to throw a punch, because the game tells us from the start, he's not a fighter. We don't miss having a weapon because the game makes it clear that that was never an option for us in the first place. This makes successfully running and hiding from enemies more satisfying than it would be otherwise, because you're making good use of the only tools you've been given. Imagine how different the core mechanics of the game would feel if, at the start, you were given a gun. This would irrevocably change how the entire game would feel. Even if you only had the gun for the first few minutes and then it was destroyed or taken away, the entire game would feel different because the player knows that they could have a gun. Running and hiding wouldn't hold nearly as much satisfaction or relief, because in the back of their mind, the player is just thinking of how much easier this could be if they got their gun back. Trying to escape the doctor wouldn't feel tense or frantic, it would be an exercise in wondering why you can't just steal his massive cleaver scissors and stab his eyes out. If you know that there are tools in the game that can help you, and the game itself seems to be arbitrarily withholding them, I think it's perfectly understandable to get a little annoyed. And that's exactly the experience you get when you try to change Minecraft mechanics for the purpose of horror. Even if the player is doing their best to be immersed and was told beforehand that they won't be able to do all the things they're used to, there's still going to be that knowledge in the back of their mind that this isn't the way that Minecraft is supposed to work. In the end, everything circles back to knowledge. I know I was skeptical of the criticism that these mods stop being scary once you know how the monster works, but the more I look at it, the more that feels like the heart of what's going on. Minecraft is a game that everyone knows, so the only horror elements you can add are your monster, so you're basically speedrunning the problem that every horror game has to deal with. So you try and make your monster as scary as possible, but dying too often will kill the tension. The only ways you might mitigate that are difficult to implement, because this is an open world sandbox game where players can do anything they want. And trying to limit what they can do from a mechanics perspective is also difficult because the player can't help but think of what they're missing out on, which leads to them thinking of all the things they can't do rather than what they can. What you already know about the game has a severe impact on how playing a mod will feel, for better or for worse. And the process of learning how the new world and mobs work is the very thing that allows players to overcome their fear. But what if you weren't the only thing learning? This entire time, we've been assuming that the threats will remain static. We talked a little about ideas of how to introduce the monster when the player is ready to handle it, but the monster itself has remained the same. What if it didn't? What if as you were learning to survive and escape your nightmare, the nightmare was learning with you? Let's talk about Alien Isolation. I have never heard Alien Isolation described as anything other than terrifying. It's similar to the other titles we've discussed. You're trapped in a dilapidated, often claustrophobic setting with something you have no hope of defeating. Combat is available, but it's really only effective against the various human and human-like enemies you come across. The alien itself is unkillable, and any attack from it will kill you instantly. But unlike Outlast or Amnesia, you're given a few more tools to work with. Although you can't kill the alien, it's afraid of fire, so using a weapon like the flamethrower is an effective way to get it to back off, at least for a minute. Items like flares and noisemakers can be used to distract those hunting you, and you're given a motion scanner that allows you to keep track of where the alien is. And if the worst happens and you peek around a corner and see this thing sniffing around, hiding places are fairly common in the form of empty lockers and cabinets. You can even hide under tables in a pinch. All of these tools are basically essential against an unkillable enemy like the xenomorph. However, these tools don't provide nearly as much comfort as they should, because the xenomorph in this game is no ordinary monster. The adaptive AI of the xenomorph in this game is incredibly famous at this point. Composed of 2 different AI systems and a staggeringly large behavior tree, the alien's behavior changes in a way specific to your actions. While you're learning how to survive, the alien is catching on to all your little tricks and becoming even faster and smarter in its own right. And once the player catches on to what's happening, using the tools the game gives you starts to feel like a trap. Because even if you get away, the very act of escaping allows the enemy to learn more about you, making your next encounter even more dangerous. If you hide in Outlast, Chris Walker is programmed to randomly check the hiding places in the room. This can make hiding in a locker feel like a bit of a dice roll. Hiding in a locker in Alien Isolation feels like playing Russian roulette, except every time you manage to survive, the alien puts another bullet in the gun. Every tool given to you in this game is tailored to become less helpful as time goes on. This allows the alien to remain an immediate threat through the entire game without actually ever getting any stronger. From start to finish, the alien is a terrifying presence that never gives the player a sense that they have the upper hand, because it's only a matter of time before the things keeping you safe won't stop it anymore. Now, at this point, you might be wondering why making the player afraid to use certain mechanics is any different from taking them away. Shouldn't Alien Isolation run into the same problem I brought up with these Minecraft mods? Well, no, not really. While it can be frustrating to get stuck waiting for the alien to leave, the game doesn't ever stop you from using the mechanics it's set up. As long as you find the right things, you can always use them. Would it be a good idea to throw every flare you found into the alien's face? No, obviously not. But there's no pop-up preventing you from doing that if it's really what you want to do. Alien Isolation isn't removing mechanics or making it harder to do things arbitrarily, it's just giving you a very strong incentive to not draw attention to yourself. And for the record, although the alien is an extremely dangerous enemy that will obliterate you the second you're in its hitbox, the developers were still very careful about balancing this. I just went over how your ability to ward off the alien gets weaker over time, but the alien still needs to find you first. Although one of the AI systems knows where you are at all times, that's not the one in the driver's seat, so a player can still avoid being seen with careful enough positioning. The alien also has something called a menace gauge, which is meant to measure how much pressure the player is feeling and how overwhelmed they might be. If the menace gauge reaches a certain level, the alien will retreat into the vents, providing the player with a brief respite. Because the developers understood that while it's important to make the player afraid, it's also important to let them have a break and make progress. Because it doesn't matter how well your monster is designed, if everyone gets sick of dying and stops playing, they'll never see its full potential. Which once again leads us back into Minecraft horror mods. If you've been paying attention, you'll have realized that even though adding a monster that constantly adapts and learns from your behavior to Minecraft would be awesome, all the issues we've discussed would still apply. It's difficult to produce an authentic feeling of dread and paranoia in a free and open world, having a monster that constantly kills you is tiring rather than scary, and not allowing any sort of counterplay when your player base is used to having it can get annoying fast. But there's one other problem I haven't brought up yet. One of the biggest things keeping these mods from being truly scary is the fact that Minecraft is a game that never ends. In this video, I've talked a lot about balance. Balancing mechanics, balancing challenge, balancing fear. This is because horror isn't just about throwing something scary at your audience. The moments where the monster isn't there are just as important as the climactic moments where they are. Horror is about tension rising, being released, then slowly rising again. This cycle, this balance, is crucial if you want to create a complete experience, and in an interactive medium like video games, there needs to be some sort of goal. You can't just expect the player to sit there and be scared forever. There needs to be something to convince them to move forward in spite of the horror. Like finding out what happened to your memories, defending yourself in a zombie-infested city, trying to escape an insane asylum. Without a goal to push the player forward, why would anyone stay in these horrific places? Minecraft, on a fundamental level, has a very hard time giving a player these sorts of goals. It is a completely different game than any of the examples we've used. Minecraft doesn't make any attempts to tell the player where to go and what to do, and that's perfectly fine. It has some survival elements and occasional creepy ambiance, but at its core, Minecraft is a sandbox-type building simulator. There is technically a story if you want, but there's nothing actively steering you toward it. The only direction the game gives you is occasional prompts telling you how to gather resources and when you've obtained new recipes. The entire point is that you can go anywhere and do anything. So when you pluck a horrific monster from a completely different genre and just drop it in, it might be scary for a few minutes, but it will inevitably wear thin very quickly. There's almost no way to keep someone scared in perpetuity. Eventually, things have to come to a head. And in a game that never ends, there's no easy way to do that. These horror mods end up feeling less like a complete experience and more like showcases of a cool monster someone built. They're interesting to look at and play around with for a while, but after a certain point, there's nothing to do with them. And their inclusion gets in the way of the other things the player wants to be doing. An example of a resource management / crafting game being a little more balanced when including horror elements is Dredge. Dredge is a fishing game where selling your fish gets you money to upgrade your ship and equipment. But as you keep going, the fish start to get strange mutations, and you find that there are massive creatures out at sea that you need to avoid to complete your goals. And so you take it upon yourself to get to the bottom of what's causing this, and catch a bunch of fish as you go. While the focus of Dredge is exploration and discovery, the horror elements are undeniable. It's not a super scary game, but it wears its Lovecraftian inspiration on its sleeve, and the moody and mysterious atmosphere help to sell the possible dangers that lurk beneath the surface. Fishing at night feels foolhardy, and there are a few moments that are legitimately tense. Of course, this sort of subtle creepiness isn't usually what Minecraft mods are aiming for. And even though Dredge is somewhat similar to Minecraft in that you gather materials to make more things, they're still very different games. And Dredge has nowhere near the limitless possibility Minecraft does. It has a lot to offer, but eventually you learn all there is to know and the game comes to an end. A couple of endings, actually. But Minecraft is a game that never ends. Even if you complete all the achievements and slay the dragon 10 times over, you can just keep going. The possibilities are literally endless. Minecraft only ends when you stop playing. And in the case of Minecraft horror mods, you often stop playing because the mod has nothing else to offer you. If someone asked me to explain how horror games scare people in the simplest way possible, I would say that they work by depriving you of something. They remove context for the situation, knowledge of how to avoid danger, the player's personal sense of safety, the list goes on. And Minecraft is a game that wants the player to go anywhere and do anything, with the only obstacles being stray skeleton arrows and gravity. So the only way to make Minecraft truly scary in the way people want is to turn it into something that doesn't feel like Minecraft anymore. So, are we just doomed? Is Minecraft destined to always be comforting but never terrifying? Completely incapable of eliciting true fear from its audience, regardless of how much you try? No! Sorry, I got a little excited there. Although incorporating horror in Minecraft is difficult for all the reasons I've mentioned, it's definitely not impossible. And we know this because Minecraft has done it. I'm not going to say that Mojang started adding more horror stuff to their game because so many people started making spooky mods and videos talking about the creepy aspects of the alphas. I'm just going to say that they have excellent timing. The Warden was added 3 years ago. Did not realize it had been that long. And I consider the Warden to be Minecraft's first real try at incorporating horror into their game. It deals very handily with all the problems I brought up and holds its own as being a genuinely nerve-wracking encounter you can have. The Warden only spawns in the deep dark biome, which means several things from a design perspective. Because it only spawns under very specific conditions, the developers have a lot more control over how players will encounter it. This also allows them to design an environment that allows the Warden to be as threatening as possible. Everything is covered in skulk, which makes the cave even darker and eerier than it would be otherwise. Because you're in a cave, your options for running from danger feel a lot more limited. allowing the player to feel trapped in a way that isn't possible in the overworld. Going into this area feels like trespassing, like messing with something that's better left alone, and the Warden's appearance accentuates this feeling. It spawns via this frankly terrifying animation, where it digs its way out of the ground to start searching for those who would dare disturb it. This monster can kill most players in a single hit, and it can move concerningly fast when motivated enough. Similar to Alien Isolation, this makes you feel helpless not by removing mechanics, but by making the use of them a really bad idea. The Warden hunts for you primarily using sound, and all the escape methods the player is used to, such as burrowing into a wall or pillaring up to get out of reach, make very noticeable noise. And any additional noise you make once the Warden is awake makes it even more dangerous. If it's angry enough, it will disregard its blindness and immediately start gunning for you. And with an extremely strong melee attack and a ranged sonic attack that can pass through objects and walls to hit you no matter what, being rushed by a Warden is a death sentence in almost any circumstance. And yet, even though it's an extremely dangerous mob that's nearly unkillable in every circumstance, it still has that all-important counterplay. It only even spawns if you activate a Skulk Shrieker 3 times. As long as you're being very careful, you can traverse its environment without setting it off. And if it is there, as long as you keep quiet and move patiently, it's entirely feasible to sneak away and live another day. And because it only ever spawns here and isn't a monster specifically added to hunt the player to the ends of the earth, there's no danger of the player getting stuck in a tiring, endless death loop. If you don't want to encounter the Warden, you don't have to, and the Skulk of the Deep Dark becomes something you know to avoid. But here's the really cool part, the part that brings it all together. You might actually want to seek the Warden out. Not for the Warden itself. It's specifically designed to not be worth the trouble of killing, only dropping a few experience and 1 Skulk catalyst on death. But venturing into its home might be worth your while. The ancient city is a biome of the Deep Dark guarded by the Warden, and in it you can find unique items that aren't obtainable anywhere else in the game. Stuff like Echo Shards, the Swift Sneak enchantment, and the Ward and Silence armor trims. It's nothing too amazing for players who took one look at the Warden and decided they preferred life, but it's oh so tantalizing to others. Since Minecraft isn't all about the Warden, they can't give you the specific goals a horror game usually does, but these special items give players a reason to interact with something that they'd otherwise avoid at all costs. The Warden is an incredibly well-designed monster that integrates into the world of Minecraft nearly seamlessly. Is Minecraft suddenly a horror game with the inclusion of the Warden and now the creaking? No, of course not. But they prove that, although it's difficult, horror concepts can feel right at home in everyone's favorite block game. And even though I've been somewhat critical of these horror mods, there are things I like about them, and I think a lot of them are really close to feeling like they belong in Minecraft. Part of the original creepiness of the game was the feeling that somehow you're not alone in this single-player world. And the Cave Dweller taps into this by attaching an entity to some of the game's most mysterious ambiance. My first playthrough with the Man from the Fog was mostly me cowering in my house, but while I was testing how it spawned, I found some pretty juicy lore stuff that I really want to go back and dig into at some point. And despite it being repetitive to have him show up every 10 minutes, it's undeniable that this thing is terrifying. Just look at him, he's so creepy! And his model does this cool thing where parts of his texture disappear when you move, so he's actually really hard to see if he's a bit far away. I wasn't planning to play these horror mods outside of making this video, but I might have to make an exception for this toothy spider guy. And the mod pack that smushes everything together was just crazy. It's stupidly difficult in a way that seems a bit unfair, but some competitive, defiant part of me wants to get good enough to know what on earth is going on. And these are just the 3 mods I decided to play. It's abundantly clear that there's no shortage of creativity in this community, and I love to see it at work. And I didn't even get to talk about the mods that go in a completely different direction than just adding one monster. such as a certain all-encompassing mod that seems to have been making waves lately. If this video made you even a little curious about Minecraft horror mods, I highly encourage you to check them out. I've linked all the mods I played in the description, as well as some resources for how to download mods, because as someone who had never done it before, it was very intimidating to try for the first time. If you decide to play Better Horror Plink, I have some quick tips for staying alive. Find a village as quickly as you can, don't ever sleep, and don't go in this building. It'll become night and start raining blood. Whether or not you decide to play these mods, I hope this video was enjoyable to watch. I hope it provided you with some nutritious food for thought and some insight on how horror in video games can be implemented. It was really fun to make, and I now know how to download Minecraft mods, so I think it's a win all around. If you liked this video and wished you'd seen it sooner, say a couple of days sooner, consider supporting me on Patreon. It's a great way to support me and the channel, and it allows you early access and an exclusive look at my creative process. Thank you all so much for watching, and if you'll excuse me, I think me and my husband are off to watch the Minecraft movie, which I might end up rewriting in a few months. Or maybe not. Maybe it'll surprise me and be fantastic. I mean, anything is possible, right? Take care of yourselves and each other, and I hope to see you all again soon. Bye!